Hello there, this is Mr. Dunaway again, and welcome back to the Wildcard Game Word Assignment. And what you should have on your screen, if you've completed the typing from class, is a text that looks pretty much like this. And we are going to just have some fun doing some formatting with it. I'm going to guide you through a few things to do and then give you some creative liberty at the end of the lesson. But that's the first thing to do, is to have this typed. Now before I do anything, I'd like to show you a couple things up here at the top. We talked in the last video about the tabs up here. And right now you should be on the Home tab. Okay, so if you're not on the Home tab, go ahead and select that one. And check a couple things. Right here, this box right here, this is the font. And it should say Times New Roman. If it's blank, what has happened is you have two different types of font within your document. So it's not, it may not be showing you that. Or if you do have two types of font in there and it's not blank, maybe you don't have it highlighted. But if you select the entire document, and I was wrong, it wasn't Times New Roman, it was actually, I don't actually know how to pronounce that, Calibri font. It's a really common font, and it says it's 11 point font right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to change that first of all. If you'd highlight everything for me, go ahead and follow along. You're going to highlight that and go down and select 14 font, and now they are all the same there. I think the reason it says, see, this is really interesting here. It says Times New Roman because down here I have Times New Roman when my mouse is there, but not up here. So I'm going to just go down and delete those extra spaces where Times New Roman is now gone because I was doing some typing down there below it. So we will start with that font right there. And in fact, let's just start with that. Why don't you just select your whole document for a moment, and we'll start with this box. These are all different types of fonts that you can type in, and the cool function here is if you just scroll over a font, you can see what it looks like in the window of the text as you move around. So there's a font there, there's a cool looking font, and all kinds of things there. But one of the most common ones that we use is that Times New Roman. That's always fun if you want to put it in a cursive, fancy cursive type of setting there. So take a minute and just mess around with some of the fonts. And you want to stay out of the symbol things because you can't read it. If you want to look at it, that's fine. Just don't leave it there for me. And take a minute and just play with that. Wingdings is awfully fun because you get all these different characters. If you learn what those keys are, you can use those characters to insert it within documents. When you're all done, go to Times New Roman and select that one at 14 point, and we will just start there, and we will do some changing of that as we go. Now, what I'd like to point out is this text actually came from an online article I found, and I don't know if you recall, if you remember, in 2014 was the year the Royals went to the World Series and ended up losing in the World Series. But to get into the World Series, they had to play a one-game playoff called the Wild Card Game, and it was an amazing story where they were down like 4 or 5 runs in the 7th or 8th inning to one of the best pitchers in baseball, and they ended up coming back and winning that game. They came back and tied it in the 8th. They fell behind in the 9th, came back in the 9th and tied it, fell behind and went to extra innings. They fell behind in the 10th or the 11th inning, and then remarkably ended up winning the game in extra innings. And it was on October 1st, 2014. And it's a special memory for me because I was there. I'm a big baseball fan, and it was the most amazing game I've ever watched there. So I found this online, and here is what it looked like when I found it online, just to show you. So it had some kind of fun font things in there that I thought would just be a fun way to kind of introduce, some of the changes that you need to be able to do in Microsoft Word. So here was the article and the story, and as I scrolled down, that was Salvador Perez hit the game-winning base hit that scored the winning run, and this was just a short article they did about it. So I'm going to kind of use that as a model, and we're going to try to create that look in here. But you'll just watch my screen as we go, and then we'll compare it in the end. So going back to the basics of Word, if you take a look up here, you're on the home screen. So the first thing we're going to do is make sure it's all in Times New Roman, 14-point font. And let's just start with the title. There's a couple things I can do with the title. I can keep it on the left side. If you take a look at these symbols right here, right above where it says paragraph, and again, make sure you're on the home tab. If you don't see this stuff, you're probably on a different tab. And if you're on home and you don't see these, why don't you get my attention and I will come help you get that figured out. If we wanted to center that title, we could click that one and we could put it in the middle right there. And if you want to put it on the far right side, you could click that bar over there. And what this one does, you don't notice it here, it actually aligns the edges to make them make everything line up on the left side and the right side as well. But I think I'll just stick with this tab here on the left. I prefer that over the centering one. And what we're going to do is we're going to increase that font, okay? Because this is the title of the article. Again, I'll show you the article. So we want the wild card game to be larger. So let's experiment with that. So you want to click and drag. Now, as this video is playing, you should be pausing the video. Go over to your Word document and make the changes as I go. Let's select a number here. Now, when you click this column, you see all kinds of choices here. And the nice thing about Word is that as you make the change, you can see how big it is in actuality. So, I don't know, 26 or 28. Why don't we go to 28? Let's make that 28. And then I also notice on that that it seems bolded. That may look a little too big. So let's go unbolded and just keep it at 28 font there. Okay, so that's the first thing, is you can change fonts here in this tab, and you can change sizes right there. Now, right now you'll see it says 14, and that's because my cursor is currently on the second line right here where it says EndNote, which is editorial note. And then if I select the whole thing, you'll notice that my number in the font size disappeared. And the reason that happened is because I have two different font sizes selected, so it's confused and it just went away because it's like, well, I don't know what. It depends which you're talking about, the first line or the rest of them are different, so it just goes away. All right. Also, if we want to have some fun, even though this is slightly different, why don't we change the font of the title to something different, just to change it up a little bit. And we'll take a look here and see. How about Century? All right, let's go down. Let's do Century there. Yeah, it's slightly different from from Times New Roman, but it gives us a different font there. And again, now if I highlight the whole thing, you'll see both my font and my text size has disappeared because I have two different fonts there. Okay, so that is title, and that is font changing and size changing right there. And then again, if you wanted to bold it, you could. In fact, let's do that. Would you go ahead and highlight that now, and we'll go ahead and bold it into Century at 28 font. Would be awesome. All right, let's go down to this part right here. Well, this is an article written online in the editorial, or the editor made a little note just talking about how this article is actually a series of articles about the Royals' entire path through the 2014-2015 World Series. So this is just a small part of a bigger group of articles that exist. Okay, one other thing to point out, if you notice when I highlight this, I get this little box that shows up. That's kind of a fast way to make these changes we've been talking about. And you can certainly use that as you get more familiar with it. But I think for this assignment, I'm going to ask that you stay in the menus and the tabs at the top of the page where we can kind of get an understanding of that. But Microsoft Word has tried really hard to make this process as simple as possible. All right, so this particular part, if you notice in the original article, is italicized because it's not actually a part of the article. It's just a note to the reader to be aware of as you go through, that it gets just a little more intense as things go on there. So let's change that to italics. So if you go up here right under where the font name is, there's an italics button, and that's pretty simple to change right there. And you now have the editorial note that looks like the article itself. Okay, as we go on down, this sentence is actually a hyperlink, which means if you click on that online, it will take you to an article about that particular sentence. So that sentence says, many feared how short our playoff experience would be. And then it actually links to another article, which we're not going to do the link, but what we will do is we'll change the color, because when you hyperlink it online, you'll see what actually happens, and you might even know how to do that, depending on your experience. Let's just do the color change for now. It would automatically happen for that. So skip down to the last line of that first sentence, and you can click and drag so it's highlighted. And to change the font color, you want to click on, if you look right here, just slightly to the right of where the font size changes, on the bottom, mine is on the bottom, you'll see the letter A with a black line underneath it, or that black line is going to match whatever the color of font is that you have highlighted. So let's change that and maybe pick some kind of a blue. It won't exactly match the article, but typically hyperlinks are a blue color, so there's kind of a blue thing right there. And it's also bolded. So now that we've changed the color, let's go back to the bold button and let's select bold. And it's not exactly, but it kind of gives you the idea. And then one other thing that happens when you do hyperlinks is it creates an underline sometimes. And even though we're not creating a hyperlink, let's go ahead and underline that sentence, which is right to the right of the bold icon. So if you move over 2 on mine and you click that, it'll underline and match the color of that. So it looks like it's a hyperlink in our document, but it's really not. Okay, so what you've seen there is you've seen bold, italics, you've seen underlines right there, and you've seen how to change color on a text. Now there's another cool feature in Microsoft Word. And if we go back here, you'll notice that what he did right here was he quoted, I believe, some article about, basically is about how bad James Shields pitched in that game, where basically the Royals fell behind his pitching right away. So he italicized it and he moved it in and put this bar right here. So again, he's got something special going on, but we can see how to do that in Microsoft Word. So what we're going to do is we are going to highlight that entire paragraph. And we are going to, what we want to do is slide the entire paragraph to the right about a tab's length. So if you go back up here, again, we're still on the Home tab. And if you go up here and you see these 2 buttons right here that have an arrow, this one has an arrow pointing to the left, this one has an arrow pointing to the right. The arrow pointing to the right, that's increasing an indent. Okay, the arrow pointing to the left decreases it. So basically, if I highlight this whole area, I can move that whole thing to the right there. And then if I hit italics, it will turn it into looking a lot like the italicized portion of his article right there. Okay, right now my video is pressing at 13 or 14 minutes, so this is just part 1. So get all caught up on your article to this point and have it looking exactly like mine, and then when you're finished, I will have you begin with part 2. And we will talk to you in a moment.